When you think about it, governments are a fascinating example of the choices humans have made to improve the quality of their lives. It is believed that governments first evolved when people discovered they could protect themselves from one another and from the threat of outside groups if everyone within their group chose to allow one or a few of them more power than the rest. These select few individuals would create and enforce a set of rules to ensure law and order, and would work to protect the group from outside forces. Since that time, what constitutes more power than the rest has been a grand experiment, to say the least. Amongst the hundreds of attempted governments, a handful have risen up to make a lasting impact on our world, some with more success than others. Our top 5: monarchy, constitutional government, democracy, dictatorship, and communism. Let's see how they work. What is a monarchy and how does it work? The most ancient form of governance that we know of is the monarchy. In a true monarchy, a single person rules the entire country, and that authority is generally inherited. Their titles may vary, but the most common associated with a monarchy are king, queen, emperor, or empress. Evidence has been found that identifies monarchies going back as far as 3150 BC, with King Narmer in Egypt. That's over 5,000 years ago. The oldest continually ruling monarchy that we know of is Japan's Yamato dynasty, which traces its origins back to 660, making it the oldest continuous hereditary monarchy in the world. Emperor Akihito has reigned there since 1989 and is thought to be the 125th emperor in his line. Monarchs are rarely ever elected, especially in the modern world. Instead, it is heredity that most often determines who will be the new ruler, as the title is passed from father, the king or mother, the queen, to a son or daughter, the prince or princess. For example, when Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom dies, her son Charles, Prince of Wales, will inherit the throne. His oldest son, Prince William, Duke of Cambridge, is the next in line after Prince Charles. Although the responsibilities of today's monarchy differ from country to country, the way those responsibilities are decided on tend to fall into one of two categories: absolute monarchies and constitutional monarchies. In an absolute monarchy, also known as a despotic monarchy, the king, queen, emperor, or empress has unlimited power and authority within the country he or she rules. All decisions affecting the country are determined solely by the ruler. Currently, there are only 5 countries operating as traditional absolute monarchies around the globe, with 2 more that have their own variation of an absolute monarchy system. However, today, in the much more common constitutional monarchy, the ruler acts as the head of state within a written, unwritten, or blended set of rules commonly referred to as a constitution. The power of the monarch in a constitutional monarchy is restrained by parliament, by law, or by custom. A constitutional monarch may work within a group of individuals within their country to rule their nation, or they may be more of a figurehead, a representative of their country to others around the world, but without much power to create rules or enforce them. With the exception of the Pope at the Vatican in Rome and a few countries in Asia and Africa like Saudi Arabia and Swaziland, most contemporary monarchies, such as those in Great Britain, the Netherlands, Sweden, Australia, and Spain, are constitutional monarchies. But more about that coming up. First, let's take a moment to review what we've learned so far. Question number 1. What is the most ancient form of government in the world? A. Monarchy. B. Constitutional government. C. Democracy. D. Dictatorship. The correct answer is A. Monarchy is the most ancient form of government in the world. Question 2. When it's time for a new monarch, what is the most common way that the next monarch is chosen? A. Free elections. B. Governmental overthrow. C. Hereditary inheritance. Or D. An act of Congress. The answer is C. When it's time for a new monarch, the most common way that the next monarch is chosen is hereditary inheritance. Question number 3. Which of the following countries' government is not an example of a monarchy? A. The Pope's rule at the Vatican. B. Saudi Arabia. C. Great Britain. D. Switzerland. The correct answer is D. The country's government that is not an example of a monarchy is Switzerland, which is a federal republic. What is a constitutional government, and how does it work? As the popularity of hereditary rule faded, many countries around the globe adopted a new form of rule known as constitutional government. Most governments in the world now have a national constitution that contains the rules and regulations of their country. These constitutions determine how power is both exercised and controlled. Evidence of constitutional government dates back as far as 2300 BC under a Sumerian king in Mesopotamia, a region now known in the modern day as Iraq. Constitutional government works hand in hand with other forms of government to create a more complete alternative for rule. For example, in democratic countries, the Constitution can be amended or even replaced by a popular vote, either directly, as in a direct democracy, or indirectly through elected representatives, as in a representative democracy or republic. The United States of America, a republic, ratified its Constitution on June 21st, 1788. It is both the oldest and the shortest written, fully functioning constitution of any major government in the world. The original U.S. Constitution contained only 4,543 words, including the signatures, and was only 4 pages long. With the addition of the 27 amendments, it is now only 7,591 words. But it's not always size that counts. There is a simple clarity in the U.S. Constitution that has made a lasting impact on the world. In just the first 52 words, the U.S. Constitution outlines its entire intent and purpose. Let's break it down a little and take a closer look. We, the people of the United States, who this Constitution has been created by, in order to form a more perfect union, why these people created this Constitution, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. What the purpose of this Constitution is as it relates to the creation and management of a new nation. Do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. And we all agree to this arrangement. A simple, direct, and especially powerful statement indeed. Constitutional republics, like in the United States, are just one example of how constitutional government works with other governing ideology. Other examples of constitutional governments include Australia, Spain, and the United Kingdom, which are constitutional monarchies, and the Czech Republic, Greece, and India, which are republics. Before we investigate the next form of government on our list, let's review. Question number 1. What is common to most constitutional governments in the world? A. Absolute power held by one individual. B. A set of rules and regulations to govern, often referred to as a constitution. C. The end of private ownership. D. Hereditary inheritance. The correct answer is B. What is most common to constitutional governments in the world is a set of rules and regulations to govern, often referred to as a constitution. Question number 2. True or false? In democratic countries, the Constitution can be amended or even replaced by a popular vote, either directly, as in a direct democracy, or indirectly through elected representatives, as in a representative democracy or republic. The correct answer is true. In democratic countries, the Constitution can be amended or even replaced by popular vote, either directly, as in a direct democracy, or indirectly through elected representatives, as in a representative democracy or republic. Question number 3. Which of the following is an example of a country that combines constitutional government with another form of government? A. Great Britain. B. The United States of America. C. Greece. D. All of the above. The correct answer is D, all of the above. Great Britain, the United States of America, and Greece all have forms of government that utilize a constitution. What is a democracy and how does it work? We've already learned about 2 forms of government from around the globe. Now let's take a look at one that's a little closer to home. Let's look at democracy. A democratic government is one in which the people of the country, rather than a king, queen, emperor, or empress, make the necessary decisions on how that country will conduct itself. The word democracy comes from 2 Greek words, demos, which means the people, and kratia, which means power or authority. So, in a democracy, all the power goes to the people. Simply put, a democracy is a form of government that functions on self-rule, as the citizens are the ultimate authority and create for themselves both the rules of the local and national government and the means to enforce them. Democracy dates at least to ancient Greece, often called the cradle of democracy, around 430 BCE, although there are places in India that claim to have started earlier. Some historians believe the oldest living democracy in the world is the Iroquois Native American Six Nations Confederacy, which has been in place for over 800 years. In a pure or direct democracy, every person gets an equal say as to the rules and regulations of a country. However, the only country today that is currently considered a direct democracy is Switzerland. Most democratic countries have representative forms of government. For example, in the United States, which has a republic democracy, individuals are elected to positions of authority by the citizens to represent their best interests on the national and local level, which the elected officials do by voting, because in a republic, the ultimate authority comes from the citizens and their vote. The 2 most common forms of democracy utilized today are parliamentary democracy, like in Great Britain, Australia, Canada, and India, and presidential democracy, like in the United States and France. For a democracy to work, citizens within them must participate in their own governance by creating political parties, engaging in political campaigns, and holding elections based on agreed upon rules. It becomes easy to see that in a democracy, the vote is the most powerful tool. Let's review. Question number 1. What country is known as the cradle of democracy? A. The United States of America. B. Germany. C. Australia. D. Greece. The correct answer is D. Greece is known as the cradle of democracy. Question number 2. What is necessary for a democracy to work? A. A hereditary ruler. B. Citizen participation through political party campaigns and elections based on agreed upon rules. C. Religious affiliation. D. Judicial interpretation. The correct answer is B. Citizen participation through political party campaigns and elections based on agreed upon rules are what is necessary for a democracy to work. Question number 3. What is the most powerful tool of a democracy? A. The vote. B. The vote. C. The vote. D. All of the above. The correct answer is, of course, D. All of the above. This one might seem easy, but remember, exercising their right to vote is the primary responsibility of all eligible citizens in a democracy, and it cannot work without it. What is a dictatorship, and how does it work? The next form of government on our list is the dictatorship. In a dictatorship, one person has absolute power with no constitutional restraints. They answer to no one, as their power is unlimited and uncontrolled. This might sound familiar, as a true monarchy operates much in the same way. However, there is one fundamental difference between a dictatorship and a monarchy, and it is usually a violent one. Unlike a monarchy, where we know rule is inherited, passed down from generation to generation, dictators come to power through a military takeover of the government, through rebellions, or when an elected ruler refuses to step down from their office. Imagine for a moment what would happen if one day the mayor of your town decided not to leave after someone else was elected to do his or her job. And then imagine if that same mayor gathered together an army and decided he or she would not only refuse to step down from their elected office, but also make all the decisions affecting people's lives, regardless of existing governmental rules and regulations or the will of the people. As strange as it may sound, that is just what dictators do. One of the most famous examples of dictators in history is the ancient Roman ruler Julius Caesar. Caesar raised an army and overthrew the Roman Empire, the most powerful government in the world at that time. And on February 14th, 44 BCE, he was made dictator for life. And to give you a little idea how much power a dictator can have, even though Caesar was assassinated just 1 month later, in 42 BCE, the Roman Senate declared him a god in the Roman religion. Although there are examples throughout history of dictators like Caesar, modern dictatorships began in the 19th century. As a number of countries in Latin America were freed from Spanish colonial rule, various self-proclaimed leaders rose up, raised private armies, and then marched on governments now weakened by no longer having the military support of Spain behind them. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna in Mexico and Juan Manuel de Rosas in Argentina are just two examples of men who became dictators in the Americas. But it wasn't until the 20th century that dictatorship came to serious national prominence. Adolf Hitler's Nazi Germany, Benito Mussolini's Italy, and Joseph Stalin's Soviet Union all came to power in the first half of the 20th century, and they were responsible for the deaths of millions of people. The devastation they caused was so overwhelming that it is still difficult to calculate. In the mid-20th century, Mao Zedong, another dictator, unified China and is directly and indirectly thought to have been responsible for the death of between 40 and 70 million people. In the last 15 years, while they were alive, Muammar Gaddafi from Libya and Saddam Hussein from Iraq were both considered dictators. And today, China, North Korea, and Cuba are just 3 of the estimated 50 governments in the world ruled by a dictatorship. Let's review. Question 1. In a dictatorship, the ruler or dictator, A, shares governing responsibility with a parliament. B, answers to no one. Their power is unlimited and uncontrolled. C, only has total power in Eastern European principalities. D, none of the above. The answer is B. A dictator answers to no one, and their power is unlimited and uncontrolled. Question number 2. True or false? Not only was Julius Caesar appointed dictator for life by the Roman Senate, after his death, they declared him a god in the Roman religion. The answer is True. The Roman Senate declared Julius Caesar dictator for life in 44 BCE and a god in the Roman religion in 42 BCE. Question number 3. How many countries are currently considered to be ruled by a dictatorship? Is it A, 15, B, 25, C, 50, D, 65? The answer is C. China, North Korea, and Cuba are just 3 of the estimated 50 governments in the world considered to be ruled by a dictatorship. What is communism and how does it work? This brings us to the final government on our list, communism. In the early 1800s, the Industrial Revolution had people working hard to create machines that would change the way of life for nearly everyone around the globe. This would be done by reinventing the way products were made, and it would take workers to do it. A lot of them. In response to this new need for workers, large numbers of people in some of the Western European countries began to leave their farming lives and move to the growing cities. There, they found jobs working in something that at the time was quite new to the world. They found jobs at factories. Unfortunately for those new workers, they had no rights regarding the way they were treated at work, and they often had to work under extremely harsh and dangerous conditions. These unfair and often unsafe work conditions were repeated again and again in factories all over the world as the Industrial Revolution reached its peak. Critics of the situation began to believe that capitalism, the economic system that much of the world uses, was at the root of the problem. They thought it created a class system of owners and workers, or those that have and those that have not, and that this system was unfair. And they thought if they took away ownership of the factories and made them the property of all people, and then treated everyone working in the factories in the same way, bosses and workers alike, the conditions on the job and people's lives would improve. In short, they believed if all property was owned by everyone, then the hard work and the benefits from that hard work would be shared equally by everyone. And not just property. They believed the government should control the banks, education, labor, ownership of transportation, communications, agriculture, and more. They called this new system communism, and the gentleman who led this group of people, upset with what they saw as the imbalances of capitalism, was a German social scientist named Karl Marx. Outraged by what he saw as the growing gap between the rich and the poor, along with his associate Friedrich Engels, Marx wrote a pamphlet titled The Communist Manifesto. And it is said to be one of the most influential writings of the modern world since its publication in 1848. In 1917, during the October Revolution in Russia, a man named Vladimir Lenin, influenced by the teachings of Marx, led his Bolshevik party to rise up and overthrow the government. Soon after, under Joseph Stalin, they changed their name to the Communist Party. Russia became known as the Soviet Union, and they became one of the world's 2 superpowers. Marx also thought it would take a temporary dictatorship to overthrow the existing governments and redistribute the wealth of each nation, which is why we still see communism and dictatorships working together in communist countries. However, Marx thought that once overthrowing the existing government and redistributing the wealth was done, the government wouldn't be necessary anymore and would end, leaving local rule to the people. Unfortunately, once they have gained all the power and money, most dictators are not much interested in sharing either one. So, we have never seen a pure form of communism anywhere in the world. As we have learned, China, North Korea, and Cuba are run as dictatorships. But the other thing they have in common is that they are communist too. After the fall of the Soviet Union, who were the primary means of support for most communist countries, the only other countries around the globe that still identify as communist, besides China, North Korea, and Cuba, are Laos and Vietnam. Let's review one last time. Here's question 1. Outraged at the growing gap between the rich and the poor, who wrote the influential 1848 pamphlet, The Communist Manifesto? A. Joseph Stalin and Vladimir Lenin. B. The dictators of China, North Korea, and Cuba. C. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. D. Mikhail Gorbachev. The correct answer is C. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto, published in February 1848. Question number 2. Marx believed the most important principle of communism is that no private ownership of property should be allowed. But he also believed which of the following should also be controlled by the government? A. The banks and education. B. Labor. C. Ownership of transportation, all communication systems, and agriculture. D. All of the above. The answer is D. All of the above. Under communism, Marx believed that the banks, education, labor, ownership of transportation, all communication systems, and agriculture should be controlled by the state. Question number 3. How many communist countries are there currently around the globe? A. 3. B. 5. C. 7. D. 19. The answer is B. There are currently 5 communist countries around the globe, and they are China, North Korea, Cuba, Laos, and Vietnam. Thinking question. What form of government do you think is best, and why?